Yo, what's going on, my boys here? The brand new video. If you guys say welcome to my channel, I hope you're enjoying yourselves. We do all things arguing, like the video, comment, subscribe. Today we're going to do a reaction video to a former Siege content creator, former Siege streamer, former Siege analyst, and someone who also worked in Valorant in those same capacities. Her name is Geo. Check her out. She's pretty cool. I've followed her on social media for about the time that she joined Siege up until now. She's trying to be like more variety, to get into sports and other games, things like that. So she made a video recently called "How to Fix the NHL Viewership Problem." I saw that was interesting and want to check out what you guys haven't watched it yet myself. So it's me watching it together for the first time. I'm a hockey fan. My favorite team's Red Wings. So you know I have my couple my 2 cents, if you will, potentially on where this could go. As always, it comes to reaction videos. Watch the original video. Links in the box below. Give them a subscribe, give them a like, and all that good stuff. My Twitch is also linked in the box below. Butcher my English as always. But let's get into this video. Let's see what Geo has to say about the NHL viewership problem.
To reverse that problem. Hey, if you don't know me, I'm Geo. I'm a sports broadcaster, and I have an extensive amount of experience in the esports space, where we have basically cracked the code on appealing to Gen Z and innovating with the way to reach new audiences. So I would
say, when it comes to the whole crack the code and appealing to the audience, most of the esports that she's been involved in, namely like R6 for example, isn't doing amazing viewership wise. Like when it comes to like SI will get 20 to 30,000 viewers, but the NHL, that's chump change. NHL, you want millions. So Siege is bringing in millions of viewers.
like to believe that I have some experience and some expertise, or at least knowledge, that would be applicable to this problem that the NHL are suffering with. And I think it's something that any hockey fan has kind of been seeing happening for a little while. It's really hard to try and reach those new audiences, and for everything that this exciting, fast-paced game is and what it could be, it feels like it's not really reaching its full potential. So let's have a look at what the problem could be.
Well, I don't really like anyone who's on my channel. I pause a lot to give my 2 cents. When it comes to the potential on why the NHL doesn't succeed, it's the same reason for why soccer doesn't succeed in the United States. It's not that people are uninterested. It's not that people don't want to watch the NHL. It's there's other things on. When you're in the NHL, you're competing with the NFL, which is religion here. The NFL is king, is the god of sports in America. Then after that, you're competing with basketball. Then after that, you're competing with like pro wrestling, the WWE and AEW. Then after that, you're competing with the America's pastime, which is baseball. So you're competing with all these other sports, and a lot of people are kind of like, they're kind of like, I don't want to say tuned out, but like they don't really have as much interest in watching other sports when they've already been sitting here watching the NFL for 3 hours and get another like 2 hours of basketball. Baseball can literally last 16 innings. So, and then there's also tennis. Like there's other sports that goes on in America to where people are less interested the further you go down with sports, and hockey kind of just gets like left in the back. And also you have to consider the fact that the two big daddies of sports, the NFL and the NBA, as well, you have to throw in college basketball and college football in there as well. The demographics for those sports are primarily kind of on the urban side, and people are more and more interested in that. Not a lot of urban hockey players, not a lot of urban MLS players, so they're even less interesting or less drawn to be watched there. And at the same time, I'm sure Geo might go into it because the video is under 50 seconds and I'm mouthing off. A lot of the reason why people don't watch NHL games is they're not readily available. It's kind of like with the WNBA, kind of like with the NWSL. They're not readily available. In order for you to watch, let's say, a good chunk of NHL games, you got to subscribe to like ESPN Plus or Comcast Plus. You got to subscribe to basically individual services in order to watch it. You can't just watch them on like CBS. You can't just watch them on Fox. The NFL is on Fox, CBS every Sunday and Saturdays. College football is on Fox and CBS every Saturday. In NBA, they're basically their own local broadcast that don't require you to spend any extra money to watch them, whereas NHL doesn't really have that.
So first of all, I just want to reference the article that actually gave a lot of these numbers, just so we kind of know where we're at. So the average TV audience for NHL games on ESPN and Turner stands at 373,000 viewers, down from an average of 478,000 viewers accrued at the same point last season. So that's quite a significant drop in viewership from one season to the next. Turner has seen an average audience of 359,000 viewers over 36 games, which is a 16% decrease compared to the 20 games it broadcast over the same period for the 2021 2021 to 2022 campaign, and an average of 402,000 viewers have tuned into ESPN's coverage over 18 games, down 35% from the 622,000 accumulated for the 7 games it showed up until the same point in 2021 to 2022. Now, this article does also acknowledge the fact that both cable networks have been showing more games than they did last season, and so that can be part of the reason, and also the fact that there have been a lot of local blackouts involved in many of their broadcasts, which do become a problem. And if you are somebody who spends a lot of time on social media, you will see that that seems to be one of the biggest complaints. And as an international viewer, I can also confirm that that is one of the biggest complaints, and as a European, something that I still find very hard to even understand, because it's just not really something we have here. Now, I think there are a couple problems at play here. There's the fact that the currently already existing broadcasts are doing a subpar job of maintaining the current audience or the already existing audience, but also the fact that the NHL as a product, whether that's down to the broadcasts, the teams, or whatever it is not doing a super good job of accumulating new viewers. And that's kind of code for saying they're not really appealing to Gen Z very well. So let's tackle the first one first, and that is the fact that they're
I would say when it comes to like getting Gen Z to watch it, that's just more like along the lines of, does Gen Z or even the younger ones even care about sports, period? Because a lot of things about attention span, TikTok and YouTube shorts and Facebook reels and IG reels are showing you that people have a very short attention span. When it comes to watching sports, you have to have a pretty long attention span to just sit there and watch a potentially 3-hour or longer sporting event. You gotta be willing to just sit here and watch that thing for 3 hours, with some piss breaks here and there for halftime and things like that. But generally, you're just sitting and watching. I would also say when it comes to like viewership numbers, I always say this when it comes to other sports too, viewership numbers are kind of like finicky, because there's also pirate sites. A lot of people who don't want to spend the money to watch ESPN Plus, or they don't want to have to, if it happens to be like, because this happens with baseball has a habit of showing games on Apple TV. If you don't have Apple TV, you're just gonna be like, okay, I'm just gonna go to pirate site and watch it there. Pirate sites viewership don't count towards the official viewership. So NHL could have X number of viewers for a Blackhawks game versus the Red Wings, and a chunk of those people might be watching the pirate site and they don't even know that chunk is watching it. And those pirate sites, there's multiple levels, so who knows how many thousands of people are watching NHL games illegally that don't get counted into statistics. The other thing I will say when it comes to viewership, and we'll let her talk, is popularity. The big popular teams for the NHL aren't really dominating right now. And think about NHL, you think about the original 6, and when the Boston Bruins, Red Wings, Canadians, Blackhawks, and obviously there's more. Again, original 6. But when it comes to American, the United States teams, the one who stood out the most usually were the Red Wings and the Blackhawks. The Red Wings have most championships out of any American-based, US-based team. They have 11. Canadians and Maple Leafs have more than they do. No other US team has more than Red Wings. Blackhawks will catch up to them, and so are the Penguins. So when the Blackhawks and Red Wings were dominating the sport, primarily in the 90s, NHL was getting a good chunk of viewership because America had its team that they can cheer for and love, with Hockey Town USA in Detroit. So now that the Red Wings suck and the Blackhawks have also kind of like lost a step, and guys like Sidney Crosby who are getting older, NHL doesn't have star power, and it's also its best teams aren't winning. Imagine if all the best teams in the NFL right now stop being the best teams. Imagine the Packers suck, Patriots suck, Cowboys suck, the Niners suck, Steelers suck, and just imagine the Jaguars are good, the Lions are good, the Commanders are good. Like, just imagine all the bad teams get good and all the good teams get bad. Less people be watching. And also imagine there's no star power. Imagine there is no Aaron Rodgers. Imagine there is no Tom Brady or LeBron James, or imagine there is no Mike Trout or no Aaron Judge. NHL doesn't have a superstar anymore. It had Sidney Crosby, but he's getting older. You could say Ovechkin, but he's not a household name. NHL's lacking star power, and star power gets you viewership.
Not doing a good job of maintaining the already existing fan base. Now, I think it's really valid for them, or this article, to acknowledge the fact that, there are more broadcasts happening at the moment, which is going to mean that people watch less, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but it is true. I think you get things like choice paralysis, and you get a little bit bored. You don't want to watch everything. It is hard for people with normal lives and normal responsibilities to watch every single thing that is possibly in front of them.
And you also, this is a short one. This is a short one. You also have to consider the fact people are only going to watch their own favorite team. Unless you are a massive, like, super fan of a sport, you're not going to watch every team. You're going to watch your team, and that's it. You might watch a team who you kind of casually cheer for, but that's about it. You're not going to watch, if there's 4 games on, you're not watching all 4 of those games unless you are a massive fan of that sport. Like, I'll use myself for example. I love soccer. I love women's soccer. I watch every single NWSL game that they air, keyword there, that they air on Paramount and Twitch. If I don't see it on those two sites, I don't watch the games because I don't have anything else that they show. Sometimes they show it on like another sport network site that I don't have, so I just don't see it. But if they show 3 games on Twitch, I watch all 3 games. But I don't have, first of all, I don't even have a favorite team because my hometown doesn't have a team. But I will watch the other games because I'm a massive fan. If you're not a massive fan of hockey, you're not going to watch 4 games in one sitting.
However, you would have thought that in theory, if everybody can't watch every game, you should still have a lot of people watching a number of those games, whether that's for the teams they're invested in, the players they're invested in, the stories they're invested in, whatever it may be. You should still have high individual viewership for each game, even if the overlap of who is watching those games is not 100%. So why might that not be the case? Well, the number one reason, and again, this is something that a lot of people have spoken about, is the lack of storylines and rivalries and really playing into that. It's the stories of sports that make people care about sports. If all you care about is watching a guy hit a puck, you could go to your local ice rink and see someone do that. Sports in and of themselves are fun to partake in, but the love of competition is something very inherent to humanity, but also being able to relate to parts of that competition and see those rivalries and see the stories and see the redemption arcs, whatever it else you want to, oh my goodness, whatever else it is
you got
you
this,
want
Geo.
to see,
Believe in you.
that is what people tune in to watch sports for. If there is a dearth of that, then people aren't going to be so inclined to do that, because at the end of the day, it's just a hockey.
So I know what most sport fans, especially hockey fans, will say is it sounds like she's saying there's no rivalries in hockey, and there is, but there's a 2 parts to this. Sport fans are always going to look at things in a general line of sense, or let's say tunnel vision. A sport fan would say, well, Geo, there are, rivalries. Have you not seen the video of the Red Wings versus Avalanches in the 90s where there was a legit brawl where the entire team is beating each other's ass? Brawls happen in sports, and when they happen, those teams form rivalries. The rivalry that the Red Wings have with the Avalanches is historic. The rivalry that the Red Wings have with the the Penguins is historic. The one they have with the Canadiens is historic. The one they have with the Blackhawks is historic. But this is going to be more in support of Geo's comments. That's been lacking lately. Sure, in the 90s or 2000s, those things were happening. But right now, this goes back to the fact that these teams aren't good anymore. There's a lack in rivalry. You kind of have Ovechkin and Crosby have a rivalry, but for the most part, it's not really a team rivalry. It's just they're the 2 best players in the sport, so they're a rival. That's more of that is more so like than an actual rivalry. But you're lacking that Red Wings Avalanche rivalry because either one team sucks or the other team will suck, and at that point, no one really cares. And also, you're not seeing those fights happen all that often. There's a lot of respect in the NHL, so you don't really see a lot of bad blood. And she is right. People love when there's bad blood in sports. People like right now in the NBA, there was just 2 fights in like the last 7 days, last 5 days. More people are going to be paying attention to like those teams now because there was fights. The next time the Cavaliers played Memphis, we're going to watch that game because they want to see if Donovan Mitchell and Dylan Brooks want to fight again. The next time or the Orlando Magic go up against whoever else they got into a fight with, they're going to see if Austin Rivers is going to fight Mamba again. Violence creates attention. Whether you like it or not, violence creates attention. In sports being a gladiator event of modern times, people want to see that violence. And yes, hockey allows fighting and things like that, but they don't allow it as much as they used to for safety reasons. So that also turns down viewership. Hockey doesn't pull in the viewers that usually watch it because it's lacking what made hockey to begin with.
game, and it's going to be the same as the next hockey game the next day, and probably the hockey game the day after that. You need some reason to incentivize people to actually give a shit about this hockey game that's happening right now and the people who are involved in it. And of course, there will always be groups of people who will watch religiously because they are that extreme enthusiast end of the audience, but those are not necessarily the people that you need to market for, because those people can kind of be considered a given. Now, I have a number of ideas of how to improve this sort of situation, and some of them involve the way that the information is presented and the actual broadcast itself, and I think that is something that I will get to a little later because it's more relevant to something else I want to talk about. But one of the things that I see a lot of people talk about is how, for example, in hockey you see more talk of potential trades and things like this rather than actually what is going on. And I think that's kind of true. You know, for me, I came into hockey and, I'm not an endemic hockey fan in the sense I didn't grow up with hockey. I found hockey as an adult and I fell in love with it and I really adore the sport, but it was very alien for me to kind of come into this environment where the most talked about thing is where a player could end up or which players could end up being picked up by your team, and not necessarily actually what is happening with the team. It's kind of like people are very keen to talk about potential iterations of this team rather than what is being involved in the team now. And that's very strange to me. When I picked the team that I was a fan of, I became really invested.
Before she gets into like that, what I will say about this particular segment of people talking about trades or free agents instead of talking about the teams, that's not an NHL thing, that's a sports thing. It's mostly it's an American sports thing. Currently right now we're talking about, and this is the biggest story in all of sports right now in America, where is Aaron Rodgers going to be at in 2023? Will Aaron Rodgers be a Packer? Will Aaron Rodgers be a Raider? Will he be a Jet? Will he retire? What's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers? People talk about that more than the actual sports. People talk about that more than the Super Bowl. America, we love to gossip. We love to talk about the potential of where people could go. Right now, Kyrie Irving just said he wants to get traded. So people are like, will he go to the Lakers? Will he go here? Will he go there? It's not a hockey thing, it's a sports thing. Sport fans love speculating the what if. And if you're a fan of a team, you're speculating the what if of that person being on your team. Happens in European soccer too, not as much, but whenever there's like rumors going around that, Messi goes to MLS, people are talking about it. So it's just a natural thing that sport fans want to talk about these potentials and these what ifs. It's not necessarily it's not even a bad thing, but when it comes to like, people aren't talking about the actual teams themselves, that's more something that's a fan base thing and not like a community thing. The entire sport world is going to be talking about just one team. They're going to talk about the news and speculations and things like that before they talk about just the team.
In a number of those players, but that was kind of my own volition. I went and looked into those players and decided to pay attention to what was happening with them and their personalities and who they represented on the ice. But a lot of the content surrounding the team and the news that people would talk about was not necessarily about who these players were and their stories of getting there, but rather whether these players were going to stay on the team and whether one day they'd be traded. And I think that is a somewhat weak way of building stories, because you're not really capitalizing on the very thing that people relate to. That's not to say that talk about trades and what could happen with teams isn't important. I think that's a huge part of the sport, but it's like a missed opportunity to really like lean into those things that draw people to certain players. You're gonna get the players
when it comes to I know we're pausing a lot and this is a long video. When it comes to drawing people to individual players, in this country, we don't give a fuck about people's personalities. We care about character. I say character, I don't mean like, your personality. I mean, are you becoming basically an actor in your sport? Think about all the biggest names in the history of American sports. They were all characters. Deion Sanders was a character. Conor McGregor is a character. LeBron James is a character. Floyd Mayweather is a character. What they all have in common is this is not their real personality. This is not who they actually are when you see them on your screen. This is how they're acting, so you can be drawn into liking them. This is what they do. They're trying to make you remember their name. They have these nicknames so you can make memes and make graphics that involves what they are. LeBron James calls himself the king, so it's always like a throne or a crown. Think of like professional wrestling. Think of how they are characters. The Undertaker, Triple H, Kane. In sports, that's what people want. Americans, and when it comes to watching sports, we want the players to be a character, not a real person. As fucked up as it might sound, that's what we prefer. That's kind of why baseball has the same issue the NHL has. Baseball has an issue with viewership too, because there's no character. No, Mike Trout's the highest paid player in baseball, and if he walks to the supermarket, half the supermarket won't even know what the fuck he is, because he doesn't have a character. People are drawn to a character. A-Rod was a character. Jeter was a character. Even whether it's a positive character or a negative character, characters are characters, and Americans were drawn to. We love stories, and stories involve basically a fictional personality of a character.
You receive a lot of praise and a lot of attention because of how good they are. We could take someone like Connor McDavid as an example. However, I wouldn't necessarily describe Connor McDavid as like the prime fountain of personality in the NHL. But when I think of players who are considered good, but really it's their personality that grips you, I think of people like Trevor Zegras or even Getzlaf and, Pat Maroon potentially. Like these sorts of players who you actually, Jack Hughes, he's also a good example, and like those are the players that people kind of become attached to, and you see these little stories be built, but like not fully bloomed, I think. Now, this is an interesting one because when I compare this to what happens in esports, it's a lot easier to get down to that nitty-gritty storytelling and the investment in players because there's more of a blurred line between the players and the audience. In esports, you see players very, very frequently interact with the audience, whether that's through social media, through streaming, whatever it is, there's not such a distance between player and fan. And I don't expect that to change.
I want to pause again. I just want to say this comes to esports and like regular sports. The reason that happens is because the mentality towards an esports player, mentality towards a pro player in like regular sport is different. When someone watches an esport, they just see someone who's like them, who plays video games, playing a video game. When someone watches an NBA game, they don't see LeBron James and go, "Yeah, I'm like LeBron James." We both can do the same thing. It's not the same feeling. You don't get the same feeling there. It's not the same vibe. You don't look at an esport player as a celebrity. You're not in awe of Pingu, but you're in awe of Messi. If Messi, I don't even say if. When Argentina won the World Cup, the front of Messi's house had hundreds of thousands of people outside his house. You won't see 100 people outside Canadian's house. You just won't. Why? Because he's not a celebrity. He's just an esports player. He plays video games for money. I'm not like shaming that, by the way. Don't make that clear. I'm not saying esport isn't a sport. Make that clear. I'm just saying the mentality of a sport viewer and an esport viewer isn't the same, because someone who watches a sport, they're acknowledging that they're seeing someone who's doing something that they can't do, that they can never do. I can't throw that football as far as Aaron Rodgers. I can't catch that ball the same way that Devontae Adams did. I can't throw a pitch the way Vernon throws a pitch. So you're just watching it and you're awestruck in it, and it just draws you in more. Whereas like in esports, you watch someone playing, 2K Pro League. It's like, yeah, I can go play 2K and kind of do the same thing. So it is what it is.
In sports, just because that's kind of the way it is, but it does mean that there's more of an onus on the broadcast and on the organizations as well themselves to be selling the stories of those players, because the players aren't necessarily going to do it themselves. And I think that for me, as somebody who is very well acquainted with how that's done in esports, I can see such a gap between the level of intensity and relation that the audience feels between each other. Now, I want to also talk about this blackout thing as well as one of these, potential factors. And this is crazy to me. And this might be a cultural thing, but I kind of don't care. I think the idea of there being blackouts because of local and regional markets is a really, really antiquated idea. It's also a very North American thing, and it makes sense because it is a huge market and a physically huge country where person who's living in upstate New York and person who's living in Southern California are in two different universes. But in the world of social media and the world of the internet and the world where your universe, your personal universe, and the things you care about and the people that you care about and what's relevant in your life extends beyond just your hometown and your immediate environment, I don't think this is a relevant kind of format anymore. And the problem with it is it encourages piracy. And so it could even be that the viewership for the NHL may be going up, but so many of those people are pirating the views. If there is not a feasible way for people to be able to access the content that they are interested in, then they're just not going to. They're not going to pay for it. They're not going to like try and act. They will either do it illegally or they won't do it at all. And I think it is wrong as a system and a format to kind of be told which teams you have the option to watch based on where you live. Now, this is not me saying that all regional broadcasts should be axed or cancelled or hoping that this is going to change the whole system, but I think it is something that needs to be acknowledged. And I think that the modernization of the broadcasting is something that will have to be a serious consideration at some point. For example, and this is bleeding a little bit into where I want to go with my next point about how to access a younger audience metric, because I think this is very relevant to that as well. But for example, having broadcast rights be given to more digital platforms. I know that Amazon Prime has a lot of sports broadcasting these days. They do, I think, Thursday Night Football. Could be wrong on that one. They also do the English Premier League as an official broadcaster. So Amazon Prime is a really good example of one. But even if you were to sell broadcast rights to, for example, YouTube, where you have a huge already existing audience.
Going to say this when it comes like the whole broadcasting rights thing. Yes, Amazon does have broadcasting rights for Thursday Night Football when it comes to NFL. They also have broadcasting rights with NWSL, which is America's Women's Soccer League. But I will also want to say this: there's a limit to buying rights. Rights are expensive, and you aren't going to go buy every sport rights. You're going to buy the ones that bring in the money, that brings in the viewership. YouTube, which she just mentioned, just bought the rights to the Sunday Ticket, which was for the longest time was a DirecTV thing, which is an American cable company. And what the Sunday Ticket was you spend $300 a year for Sunday Ticket, and you can watch any NFL game, no matter where you're at. Was like blackouts didn't matter, out of market doesn't matter. You got Sunday Ticket, you can watch that game. YouTube just bought the rights to have Sunday Ticket, so if you have YouTube TV, which costs you money, it's not YouTube TV, it's not free. You can watch any NFL game you want. YouTube paid a lot of money for that. YouTube's not going to pay for the NHL. Why? Because they just bought a sport. They just bought a right to some sports. Again, that's the beginning of this video. It goes back to the fact that the NHL is in a crowded market. There's college football, there's pro football, there's college basketball, there's the NBA, there's baseball, there's MLS, there's tennis, there's AEW, there's WWE, there's the UFC, there's Bellator, there's boxing. It's crowded. It's going to be hard to get viewership when it's this crowded. It's going to be hard to get these TV deals when it's this crowded. It's a very, very crowded market being sports in America.
There is a very valid potential revenue stream either through YouTube Premium or through advertising. I mean, if you want good advertising, Google is basically the #1 spot for that. And you have access to demographics who probably aren't paying for cable. And the thing as well with blackouts is it ties into that previous point too, where it's really hard to build holistic stories because you have supposedly no idea whatever the hell is going on the other side of the country or in this other division or whatever. Like, your team's gonna be playing like fucking whoever else from 3 million time zones away. Oh, cool. I guess I'll just rely on like the fun facts that I'm told in the broadcast because I don't know anything about that team because I can't watch their games.
Well, that's why ESPN exists. Like, again, when it comes like this is why it matters to have Fox Sports and the NFL Network. There's Comcast has their own NHL thing as well, and again ESPN. These little sites, these networks, they give you basically a rundown, highlights, if you will, of everything going on in the sports world. So if you are a Las Vegas Knights fan, and your team's playing against Vancouver, you're not clueless on Vancouver because you watch ESPN and ESPN is telling you everything you need to know about Vancouver Canucks. So it's not like it's like that. Like she's exaggerating on purpose, and this isn't really like a combat towards her, but more so just and in general for anyone who watching to understand, you you do have options when it comes to learning and finding out about, you know, the individual teams you're playing against. Again, you have ESPN, you have these other networks. You also have the internet where ESPN's YouTube page uploading things, NHL's YouTube page uploading things. You go to ESPN's website, NHL website. There's a lot of avenues to get any information that you need to get. But again, I understand what you're trying to say.
I think setting these restrictions on your audience and on your potential audience you want to tap into is already such a huge issue with regards to trying to maintain or grow that audience. And you know, it's crazy to me as a European where so many of the NHL players are from my continent, and yet if I want to watch the NHL, I kind of can't really do that because I don't live in America or Canada.
That's more of a Europe problem, not an
There
American
is
problem.
always still going to be that core audience that these regional broadcasts can reach. But even if, like, I don't know, let's say Ali Sports West, who cover like the LA Kings, if they start doing like a lot more digital stuff or whatever that can be accessed by people outside of that market, so there's ways around blackouts. But even then you have to contend with this idea of like, okay, if I have to pay a subscription to this and a subscription to this and a subscription to this, I think focusing less on this regional network kind of system and trying to modernize that into something where maybe you can pay for whichever teams that you want to have access to, or whatever it is, there's a lot more digital options for broadcast rights. I think that's something that's going to have to very seriously be looked at, because in the last 15 years, the world has changed a lot with regards to how people consume content, how they like to consume sports, how they like to consume their media, how they like to consume their news. And the truth is, TV kind of just ain't it anymore. So let's talk about this idea with regards to reaching new audience. And really what that means, like I said at the beginning, is you want to tap into Gen Z. Now, I myself am not Gen Z. I'm like the baby millennial. But I obviously work with a lot of Gen Z. I consume a lot of content that is aimed at Gen Z. And my whole area of work really comes down to marketing towards Gen Z. Now, I have this Forbes article here, which has this interesting stat, which says Gen Z make up about 40% of global consumers, and much of their life takes place online. And then it says, in fact, Zoomers have a particular relationship with digital technology, being more digitally savvy than any previous generation. This demographic of consumers is especially conscious of sensitive social issues and the environment. So that is kind of one of those things that's important to that generation. For brands to successfully market to Zoomers, they must have a positive digital presence and, equally important, convey social awareness. The companies that appeal most to Generation Z are those that proudly stand for social values aligning with overall consumer sentiment. So this kind of hits on two really important things that I think are important to discuss here. And that is that A, Gen Z is a huge market that predominantly exists in the digital space, and B, one of the really important things about marketing to Gen Z is about what you as an entity stand for. And that latter one is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I would say, because the NHL is not free of controversy and certainly hasn't been in recent history. And I think that there have been some attempts that require improvement in how they deal with unsavory situations. I'm not really here to kind of like talk a ton about like all of the social problems with hockey and these embedded issues and whatever, but you know, looking at things like the Hockey Canada controversy that happened, which yes is not in and of itself the NHL, but it's part of the same universe, it is clear that there are a lot of issues that do need fixing and do need solving, and controversy after controversy erodes PR sentiment. Let's just leave it there. Clearly, PR sentiment is going to be an important thing. That needs to be fixed, but that is its whole own thing. And what I really want to focus on here is the point about not only Gen Z being a huge consumer base, but also the fact that they are really like digital. And again, so much of this way of marketing and broadcasting hockey comes down to local TV markets. And that's just not going to work for this generation. Now, that's not to say do a TikTok live stream of of the NHL. I don't think any sport has gotten to the point where they're live streaming on TikTok quite yet.
If that was the case, TikTok would have to pay billions to do it. The thing about, like I said before, to cancel the viewership thing and broadcasting, if you want to show sports, you got to pay up. American sports is all about not only just getting money, but also, you know, that back and forth. If, like I said before, Amazon, YouTube TV is going to have Sunday Ticket. They're hoping people will buy YouTube TV now for that. You have to give the NFL money in order for you to see their shit, and YouTube's hoping that viewership is going to go up for their paid service, not the free YouTube, but the paid service, so they can get that money back. Nothing's about use. Pat McAfee has a podcast, and this podcast is one of the biggest podcasts of sports in the United States. Pat McAfee has to pay millions of dollars to the NFL, where he used to play. He's a punter for the NFL. He has to pay them millions of dollars to show clips, not games, clips. And he's hoping that his podcast makes enough money back to where it offsets that money given up for it. So you have to pay them. You can't just be like, show stuff. There has to be a lot of money being given to that product, and also people who paid that money want to receive some money as well, some way that helps out. So again, like, I know she's joking when it comes to TikTok, that they would have to pay a lot of money.
But like I said before, I do think that trying to attain some kind of broadcast rights deal potentially with an online platform would be something that's beneficial. Now, I mentioned YouTube before because I do think that YouTube is probably a more sustainable platform than, for example, Twitch. Twitch is a little bit... It's had its issues over time with regards to figuring out the best way of making money and the best way of being super profitable. One of the problems that kind of arrives from Twitch is the fact that Twitch has always been free, and it gets very hard to figure out how to ask people to pay money for something that has always been free. And that's a problem that esports broadcasts are kind of facing, where like broadcast rights is not such a big thing in esports because they have this free platform. Now, YouTube is obviously free as well, but YouTube has a much, much better advertising system than Amazon does because, I mean, ads is basically how Google makes all of its money.
There's also YouTube TV, which is a paid subscription service.
And YouTube Premium is a thing. And even if I actually don't know what the statistics are for Gen Z's sort of as part of the YouTube Premium subscription demographic, but because a lot of Gen Zers are going to be really native to YouTube as a platform because they consume a lot of content there, they are probably more likely to be converted into paying customers if you can kind of access them on that platform. I think a really interesting sort of potential middle ground is similar to kind of what the NWSL does, where the NWSL broadcasts some of their games on Twitch. And so you have that kind of entry point where it's free to see, it's on a platform that's endemic to a younger, more digital audience, and if you can get their interest from that, then you may convert them down the line, and that's kind of the basis of marketing, right? But that is a marketing sort of project or aim that it has really sort of tapped into what it is that this target demographic does endemically. And that's something that I think the NHL have not done or have not yet fully embraced or tried to do. There's digital content, like the NHL has a TikTok page, but talking about the actual broadcast itself. And again, like that kind of ease of access and the accessibility is like, me as a foreigner, I can't really access NHL broadcasts. But if I could just get...
We're pausing again. I would say, Geo, for your country, whatever country that is, I don't know what country, I don't pay attention that much. The sport networks there need to get on a phone with the NHL and work out a deal. It's less about what America needs to be doing when it comes to NHL and how NHL needs to change things for viewership in America, and more about, you know, was it Sky Sports? Will Sky Sports want to send, you know, $1 billion or two to the NHL so they can show NHL games on a more regular basis in Europe or any other like European you know, network? They're gonna have to get on the phone NHL and, you know, make them a deal, and that deal was gonna have to be something that NHL's like, all right, we can do that. It won't be free, It's gonna cost $1 billion, at least $1 billion. It's gonna cost you. It's gonna cost any network at least $1 billion to get the rights to a U.S. sports broadcasting. So, and again, it sounds more like when it comes to this video that it's more about Europe has a hard time watching NHL games. If you're an NHL fan, you gotta make it. You gotta have someone who's there who's willing to pay that money. As an American who watches, I do watch European sports. My favorite soccer team is Barcelona. If I want to watch Barcelona games, I gotta buy ESPN Plus. If I want to watch Man United games, I gotta watch it on Paramount Plus or Peacock. I do have Peacock, Paramount Plus to watch United games. So I don't know if the UK has anything like that where you can just pay a sub fee and watch NHL games. They do. There you go. But if you want to see like it more on like a local broadcast, that's up to like the local broadcasting, whoever owns the local broadcast, to call the NHL and make them an offer they can't refuse.
A YouTube subscription or whatever it is, and that, you know, that would maybe be something that I'm a lot more inclined to do. The other interesting thing as well with a platform like YouTube, and indeed even Twitch, is you have that live chat experience, which is such a cultural part of the live streaming experience these days, especially with the growth from Justin TV into Twitch, and just live streaming being such a ubiquitous and actually also lucrative part of just cultural media consumption now. Being able to have that alongside watching your favorite sport in the same way that you do have alongside watching your favorite esport, that it's such a it breeds a sense of cultural solidarity. And so you get a lot of in-jokes, you get a lot of memes, you get this feeling of actually being involved. You're not watching through a glass window, you are an active part of this activity. And that is also something that sells really well to Gen Z that I think the NHL could benefit from. I found this really interesting graph. It was actually from a Medium article, but this graph has been credited to Morning Consult. And it's titled, Gen Z less interested in most sports properties than the general public. And it's really interesting here how we can see a number of different sports and where Gen Z kind of compare to the majority of adults. So Gen Z still have a pretty high interest in the NFL compared to all adults. Anecdotally, I would assume that part of that is...
And if you notice, Gen Z has more interest than adults in NBA. You know, kind of similar numbers when it comes to college football. Obviously, it's bigger for esports. College basketball, they get in there. A little lower in baseball, but they get in there. They're even in NHL, the USC. They're, you know, getting there when it comes to NASCAR. And then there's a little bit of gap, not even a big gap, but a little bit of gap there. And then down here, like, again, this all goes back to what I said before about it's crowded. It's a crowded business. And, you know, again, as a big sports fan, if all these companies, these leagues had a game on at the same time, I'm not watching all those games. I'm gonna watch the ones that I care about, and that's kind of how it will be for Gen Z too. They're gonna watch what they care about, even when it comes to like streaming and esports. Not everyone who watches esports is gonna watch the same thing. If you're watching Fortnite esports, you're not gonna turn off that esport to watch CG Sport. You're gonna turn it off to watch Halo esports. People who watch esports aren't watching all the esports; just watching what they care about, what they're interested in.
Partially due to the NFL's ubiquity, but also because there is a real generational aspect there that I have noticed in my kind of American friends, is that like your parents are probably a fan, and if your parents are a fan, you will have been raised a fan. It's very similar to how football, like soccer, is here in the UK. My parents are not soccer fans, so I was not raised a soccer fan, but I know.
And even with that, what she's saying now about the whole cultural or, you know, family ties to things, when it comes to NHL, at least here in America, the teams that have the biggest fan bases are teams that's been around for the longest, and teams who, you know, the team itself is ingrained within the sport. So before, I'm a Red Wings fan. I was born and raised in Detroit. I'm not in Detroit anymore, but I was born and raised in Detroit, and the Red Wings are, again, one of the original 6 teams in NHL. Not only that, they have the most Stanley Cups by an American-based team, so that's excluding the Canada teams. And the nickname for Detroit is Hockey Town. So if you're born and raised in Detroit, if you're born and raised in Michigan, period, the culture of the Red Wings is literally ingrained into you at a young age, and you're growing up. And that same thing is said people who live in Boston. When it comes to Bruins fans, when it comes to Blackhawk fans, when it comes to Islander fans, when it comes to Anaheim Duck fans. So there's certain teams out there who have like that same kind of thing that the NFL has when it comes to fan bases, where these are just massive amount of fans for these individual teams, and the teams that's lacking are the teams that don't really have that. You know, this team's been here for a long period of time. They're winners, they're champions. The Hall of Fame is filled with their players, it's not cultural when it comes to every single team, because every single team doesn't have that same kind of like attachment. You don't have that attachment when it comes to Winnipeg, because Winnipeg used to be the Atlanta Thrashers. Before that, they were also like Winnipeg was the Jets, then they were the freaking Thrashers, then went back to Winnipeg. So it's like if you're a fan, you're like, I don't really want to watch this anymore because this team keeps changing freaking cities. You know what I mean?
Know a lot of people who are huge soccer fans because they grew up in soccer families. But interesting here that the NHL is the penultimate sport listed here, where only 25% of Gen Zers have an interest in the NFL. And that is significantly further below esports, which is 35%. And actually, esports is the one where you have the biggest difference between Gen Z and all adults, with 35% compared to the 19% of all adults.
Again, so, I'm sorry, pausing again. One's video games and one's not. The older you get, the less interest in video games you get. There's not an 80-year-old right now who wants to freaking watch G2 play against freaking BDS. That's just the case. Like there will be an 18-year-old who want to see that. Like these examples are like very simple to like, you know, speak on, because it's like, man, that's kind of obvious. It's a video game. Adults aren't really as interested in video games, especially when it comes to like watching like S-Side's coming up. That's gonna last like for 4 hours per stream, and it's usually like a Bravo stream and things like that. A 50-year-old grown-ass man is not gonna be watching freaking S-Side for 4 hours. It's just not happening, especially if there's a football game on. You know, so it's like this is all obvious things when it comes to like these two numbers. This is a very obvious thing.
Massively overshadows all adults, whereas in the NHL it is significantly lower than what all adults are, and that is a quantitative proof that the NHL is failing to market towards Gen Z, and either don't know how to do that, or up until this point haven't cared. And I think that this is a problem, because there will come a point where that is the market they need to be interested in their product. And it's also frustrating because anybody who's a fan of hockey knows what a fast-paced, exciting game it is. You know, like, I feel like with football, if you don't grow up knowing football is slow, it is incredibly analytical, and it's very hard to watch if you don't know the game. But hockey's not really. It's sort of like move fast, hit puck in goal. That is accessible. It's an accessible game in terms of the ability to watch it. And that's why football is so popular. Now, obviously, football is a little, soccer is so popular. Soccer is a little bit more popular because the accessibility to play it is a lot higher than hockey is. Hockey being very expensive and obviously seasonally dependent in a lot of cases. But also we have this in esports as well, you know, where like...
It is right now. In America, it's cheaper to play hockey than to play soccer. It's the reason why you don't see a lot of people play soccer in America. It is expensive to play soccer in America. It's expensive to get to like American academies. It's expensive to like need the equipment. It's massively expensive to play soccer if you're trying to play soccer in the United States.
One of the biggest esports in the world is Counter-Strike, and the reason that Counter-Strike as an esport is so popular is because anybody can watch it. It's so easy to watch and understand what's happening, even if you've never played the game before. And hockey kind of is that. And so it shouldn't be fledgling like this. Now, one of the things that has worked really well in esports that I think is super important to bring up here, and that I think could be made use of better by the NHL, is the co-streaming phenomenon. Now, this is not completely unknown to the NHL, because Steve Dangle very famously co-streams alongside Sportsnet for the Toronto Maple Leafs games. And this is something which has really changed the game in esports. So for those who are unfamiliar, co-streaming is when influencers, streamers, whatever it is, individuals who are not part of the official broadcast or part of the sport necessarily, are given the rights to stream the game on their own channel and kind of give their own commentary and make their own kind of show about it. So it will usually be like, you know, if I'm a co-streamer, I'll be sat here in my bedroom, like I'll literally be right here, and I'll be watching alongside my audience who will have access to the live chat. They can talk to me about it. We can all like enjoy it together. And that is so undeniably popular. Oh my God, like you would have to be an idiot to not acknowledge how popular that is. And there have been cases in esports over the last few years where broadcasters tried to deny the opportunity to have co-streaming, and there's been so much audience backlash because it's so incredibly popular. So for example, I got a couple of articles up here. Esports at the beginning of the year reported that Ibai, who is one of the biggest streamers in the world, and I think the biggest Spanish-speaking streamer, he had co-streaming rights to stream the LEC, which is the League of Legends European Championship, from the beginning of this year. So this is from January, I think. And he, on his own stream, eclipsed 100,000 viewers. Now that still counts towards the official viewership of the league when they give a lot of their information, like they provide the co-streaming numbers as well. And that is nuts. But so many of those people who are watching that are people who are non-endemic to League of Legends, let's say. So a number of those people will just be fans of him, and they kind of come in using him as a conduit. And that's why for a lot of esports, for major events, like really big events, you'll find that a lot of games publishers will bring in co-streamers who do not typically stream their game. The idea being that they're tapping into a market that they don't currently have access to. So Valorant, very famously in 2020, when they had their first strike event, and this is the first year of Valorant existing as a game, they hired both Ninja and Myth, who are huge streamers, to co-stream the event. Now, there were some people who weren't happy about that because...
So the keyword there, she said hired. So it makes me believe that they paid those two people. So this all goes back to money. So if you want NHL to do co-streams, who's paying the NHL? Is it Twitch? Is it Amazon? Is the person who is doing the co-stream, or all the money that they make off that co-stream going to NHL and American sports? American sports want that money. They want something. They need some kind of change of cash going between to make sure that stuff's going down.
Either of those streamers were like endemically Valorant, but the whole idea is that they would reach an audience that the game itself would not reach on its own. Now, I know that Steve Dangle's co-streams are pretty popular, and he does them for Sportsnet. So even then, there is this difference where he's not doing them on his own channels. He's built his own reputation and whatever on his channel, but Sportsnet actually hire him to do it on their channel. So it's still the broadcast network that's making money from that. And I think that's quite like a cool little compromise that works very well for the sports industry as opposed to the esports industry. And I think it's just people like it. You could get a figurehead like Nasha, for example, who, he's just been invited alongside some other people to the NHL All-Stars, and there is everywhere on social media just all of these kids who are so fucking excited specifically to meet Nasha, and that is such a golden opportunity. Like, I actually don't know who has the broadcast rights for the Columbus Blue Jackets, but whoever that is, get them to bring him in and co-stream like their games. Like, even if you just do like once a week or something like that, it doesn't have to be every single game, but that would just be an insane way to bring in that next generation. You kidding me? Like, it's a honeypot. It's right there. No, it is really interesting because I find that there just culturally in sports is a little bit less of an understanding about what co-streaming even is or where the value is. I read this article last week from Broadcast Now, and it was sort of reporting on this round table amongst sports professionals, executives, whatever, and it's called How Rights Holders Should Approach Content. And in that article, they spoke about co-streaming, and they were like, oh, this is like a really interesting idea. And I was kind of reading this and I was thinking, this has existed for years in esports, and it's very strange watching all these executives talk about it as if it's a very new concept. It's not. It's really not. And that in and of itself is an indictment for perhaps how behind the sports industry is. But some of them were talking about, there's like the brand risk of like, what if they say something we don't like? Now, obviously, there's always the risk of that anytime that a brand works with a content creator, but content marketing or, influencer marketing, has been already, I think, like pretty globally acknowledged as one of the most effective ways at marketing to a certain generation of people, that you kind of can't really escape that. And the risk is low enough that you like the amount of money that you can make from it is just, it blows it out of the water. And the thing is, like, when it comes to working with brands, you know, as an influencer, you get given your list of things that you should or shouldn't say, can or can't say, whatever. If the influencer breaks that, or if the influencer does something controversial and risks your brand image or whatever it is, they pretty much get blacklisted. Like, no brand's going to want to work with them again. And those things are fairly easy to overcome, you know? And we even see that with celebrities. I'm not going to name celebrities who recently have lost major brand deals for doing some really heinous shit. You know, you could think that that is safe, and one of them one day comes out and does all this crazy shit. So, like, there is always that risk, but the risk isn't high, and the risk is also not so threatening to your brand that you wouldn't be able to overcome it. And you're leaving a lot of money on the table to retreat into the fear of that risk rather than embrace the opportunity. But I also think, as with any business relationship, there has to be a certain level of trust. And there also has to be a slight relinquishment of the sort of safety net of, like, what is corporately okay. You know, if you are working with an influencer who makes their own video content, or they're a streamer, like, they should be allowed to swear, you know, maybe not excessively, like whatever, like, for your brand, what, you know, whatever, like, the boundary is there. But, like, as soon as you start applying tons of rules onto what the influencer can or cannot do, you are eroding where the value in that influencer is in the first place.
And at that point, you lost NHL. Again, American sports likes to have a clean kind of image. So if you want to allow people to swear and watch an NHL game, you lost them, because again, it's all about money. They're not going to do anything that can jeopardize advertisement. They're not going to do anything to jeopardize them making any kind of cash, because someone who does have rights to their product is saying things that the advertisers don't want to hear about. I know, who cares? It's just profanity. Who cares? But again, money is king when it comes to sports, and so that advertiser dollar, they want to make sure to get every single penny they can get out of Chick-fil-A and McDonald's and Coors Light, things like that. They're not going to get that money in someone's person. I get what she's saying. I'm not saying this against her. I'm more so just projecting how they will potentially feel about it, because they care about money, and they could lose money if advertisers are like, we're going to bounce if you keep letting this person sit here and just say everything under the sun. Also, I would say a lot of this video hinges on a lot of hypotheticals. A hypothetical that if someone's allowed to co-stream, gamers will watch it. That's a hypothetical, because you don't know for a fact that someone who watches Valorant is also going to watch NHL. So people just aren't interested, especially when it comes to timing. If it's a Saturday night and you have someone who loves video games, are they going to watch NHL 7 o'clock at night, or are they going to play video games? What if there's an NHL game on 7 o'clock, they're trying to play games at 7 o'clock, and also Shroud's live? They're going to watch Shroud and play their game. They're not going to like say, fuck you, Shroud, and go watch NHL. So it's all hypotheticals. You're hypothetically thinking that if it is an easier thing to watch, then a good chunk of gamers are going to watch it because it's available. And it's like, potentially, it might not be. If potentially they allow co-streams, or they start streaming on Twitch, and they might get like 10K viewers, and it's like, I don't know, it's not really enough for us. Just how they could potentially see it.
And you're really diluting and sterilizing that, and the audience are going to not care about the content and not going to want to engage in the content because they can tell it's inauthentic. You know, I've seen this a lot of times before, where people get given so many rules from brands who want to work with them, and then they try and change the way they've edited their content, and change all their thumbnails, and change the way they present it, and write copy for them to like post on social media that's not in their voice, and it sounds very corporate, and people switch off instantly. And so there has to be this, I think this is the frustrating thing, is you get a lot of these C-suite execs who sort of like sniff this idea of like, oh, well, you know, like working with influencers could be cool, or like, what is this co-streaming? I've never heard of this. And then there isn't anybody there as part of the company who actually natively understands what those things are and how to really activate that kind of marketing. And so you end up with this real mess that comes in the middle. And this is something where I think that gap needs to be bridged, because it's such a huge opportunity. And I think that is an incredible way to convert a lot of new fans, especially in a generation that simply is not a major part of your demographic. It's also a generation that spends a lot of money. Ultimately, I love the NHL, and I'm very, very passionate about how to reach these new audiences. I'm passionate about content. I'm passionate about how to market to these people. And as a sports broadcaster myself, and somebody who spends my whole life on camera, and especially in a scene where this is kind of our bread and butter, I feel like I have this really unique perspective that I can kind of bring over into this world of hockey to try and say, hey, look, here are the things that work for us. Here are the things that really like get to that audience that you want. Use them. Here is my free consultation, you know, take it. But I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts if you made it this far. And
yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. Again, I don't disagree with a lot of things that she's saying, but I do feel like a lot of what she's saying kind of it exists in like a small vacuum of, is more based on her location than anything else, and also based on the assumption that gamers will watch the sport. Even she named NWSL. I watch NWSL when it comes on Paramount and on Twitch. The viewership's not very high when they do it on Twitch, and they also a lot of co-streams. I've done a co-stream of some NWSL games, and their viewership isn't very high. And again, that's what came to sports. NHL, they're gonna look at it like, if there's not enough viewership here, who cares? Like, they'll look at YouTube, they'll see like, okay, let's look at Geo, or there's this guy, I forgot his name, who makes like hockey content. His viewership isn't very high. They look at like, okay, y'all viewership isn't high enough for us to like really see value here, so why should we see value here? I get what she's saying. I think this is overall a very good video. You should like it. You should also get Geo, follow him. I think she deserves it. Show her some love and all that good stuff. And again, it'll be linked in the description box below when it comes to the link to this video in general. But I can also already see in my head the potential NHL comeback of, that's not really of interest. You know, the potential increase, let's say like a realistic increase is 5% of Gen Z watching a sport. That's not enough for the NHL to really care. And again, it's all about money. And you can say this generation spends a lot of money. Cool, go buy a jersey. But that doesn't mean anything if they want the same money that the NBA is getting, the same money that the NHL's getting, that the NFL is getting, which is billions of dollars. They want that. They want the big cash, not just, you know, a few $100s. And so, and again, it comes back to what I said before in this video. It's crowded. American sports is crowded. NHL's going to struggle because it's crowded. You know, if there was less sports in America, NHL would have more viewership because more people watching the NHL because there's nothing else to watch. If I'm not watching tennis, watching hockey. If I'm not watching the UFC, watching hockey. If you're not watching all these other sports, you have a higher chance. There's only so much time in a day. There's 24 hours in a day. And if you're a gamer, a lot of times you're playing your video game. But that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. Catch you guys on the next one. Y'all stay safe. Be kind to one another. Do all things I'll likes. And I'll see you when I see you. Stay safe out here. Deuces.